real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
The Dogman and My Cat. Dear Scary Stories NYC, some friendships defy explanation, transcending the boundaries of what we think we know about the natural world. This is the story of just such a friendship between an orange and white cat named Julian and a creature that shouldn't exist, yet walked among the trees behind my home with the quiet dignity of ancient wisdom. The guardian, as I came to think of this Dogman, stood nearly 8 feet tall when he rose to his full height on his hind legs. His body was like that of a man, broad-shouldered and powerful, but covered entirely in thick, coarse fur that shifted from deep brown to gray in the changing light. His head was unmistakably canine, a wolf's noble features with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to hold centuries of forest secrets. What made him truly extraordinary, though, were his hands. Large, capable, unmistakably human in their dexterity, complete with opposable thumbs that could work with surprising gentleness. When he moved through the forest, it was in a style that seemed impossible for something so massive, his footsteps barely disturbing the carpet of fallen leaves. This was the late 1990s. I had chosen to live simply in a tiny cabin, tucked away where the suburbs gave way to genuine wilderness. The house was tiny by most standards, just enough space for one person who preferred books to television and solitude to social gatherings. But it suited me perfectly. The dense forest that bordered my property stretched for miles in every direction, a living wall of oak and pine that stood long before any houses dotted this landscape. During the day, it felt welcoming enough, with shafts of sunlight piercing through the canopy to dapple the forest floor. But as evening approached, these same woods took on a different character entirely, deeper, more mysterious, full of dark shadows that seemed to move independent of the wind. The morning I first spotted my new cat friend, I was sitting on my porch with my usual cup of coffee, watching the mist rise from the forest floor as the sun climbed higher. Movement at the edge of the tree line caught my eye, a flash of orange and white that seemed too deliberate to be autumn leaves stirring in the breeze. He emerged slowly, this cat, as if he were making a grand entrance. I wanted to be sure I was paying attention. His coat was a remarkable blend of deep orange and pristine white, with tabby markings that spoke of wild ancestry, despite his clearly domestic build. He was substantial, not fat, but solid and well-muscled, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. Even from a distance I could see the intelligence in his eyes, as he studied me with the same intensity that I was studying him. For several days we engaged in a careful dance of mutual observation. He would appear at the forest's edge each morning, sometimes sitting for an hour or more, watching me go about my routine. I began leaving small offerings, a saucer of milk, a few pieces of leftover chicken, placing them at the edge of my property line and retreating to give him space. The food did always disappear, although I never saw him eating it. Gradually he grew bolder. First he ventured onto the lawn while I was inside, visible through the kitchen window. Then he began appearing while I sat on the porch, maintaining what he seemed to consider a respectful distance. I started talking to him softly, narrating my activities as if he were an old friend who'd simply been away for a while. "Good morning," I'd say as he materialized from the trees. "I'm just having my coffee. There's some breakfast for you by the oak tree if you're interested." His ears would twitch forward at the sound of my voice, and sometimes he'd offer a small chirp in response. Not quite a meow, but a conversational acknowledgement that we were indeed having a dialogue. The breakthrough came on a summer morning when a sudden thunderstorm rolled through. I was inside watching the rain streak down the windows when I heard a plaintive cry from the porch. There he was, soaked and bedraggled, sitting by my back door with the patient dignity of someone who had finally decided to accept an invitation. I opened the door slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Well," I said, I suppose you'd better come inside." He walked past me into the house as if he'd been living there for years, shook himself once, and immediately began exploring. Within an hour, he had claimed the sunny spot by the south-facing window, tested the comfort of my reading chair, and somehow communicated that the empty ceramic bowl in my kitchen would do nicely for his meals. Naming him felt important, though I sensed he already had a name. When he came inside, Ivan Julian was taking a guitar solo on an old Richard Hell and the Voidoids album. The name seemed to fit his old soul quality, so I called him Julian. Our early days together established a routine that felt both new and timeless. Julian would patrol the house each morning, checking corners and their windowsills with the thoroughness of a security guard. He claimed the armchair by the fireplace as his official headquarters, although he was generous about sharing it when I wanted to read. In the evenings, he would sit by the window that faced the forest, alert and watchful, as if he were expecting someone. The first time I saw the guardian Dogman, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was early evening, and I was washing dishes at the kitchen sink when movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. There, standing at the edge of the forest about 50 yards from the house, was a figure that shouldn't exist. My initial reaction was pure disbelief. The rational part of my mind insisted I was seeing shadows, or perhaps a person in an elaborate costume. But as I stood frozen at the sink, watching this impossible creature watch me in return, I knew with absolute certainty that I was looking at something beyond the boundaries of ordinary experience. The Dogman stood perfectly still, his massive form clearly visible in the dying light. His wolf-like head was turned toward the house, toward me, and even from that distance, I could sense the intelligence in his gaze. He made no threatening moves, showed no signs of aggression. He simply stood there, as if introducing himself in the most courteous way possible. I don't know how long we stared at each other. Time seemed suspended in that moment of impossible recognition. Finally he turned and melted back into the forest, with a silence that seemed to mock his enormous size. My hands were shaking as I set down the dish I'd been holding. Every rational thought I'd ever had about what was possible in the world had just been quietly overturned. Yet strangely, I felt no fear, only a profound sense of wonder, tinged with the understanding that my life had just taken a turn into territory that I never could have imagined. Julian, I noticed, had been sitting by the window the entire time, watching the encounter with the calm attention of someone observing a perfectly normal social interaction. When I looked at him, he offered a small trill of what sounded unmistakably like approval. Over the following days, I found myself alternating between questioning my sanity and eagerly watching for another glimpse of the guardian Dogman. He appeared irregularly, sometimes in the early morning, sometimes at dusk, always maintaining that respectful distance. He never approached the house directly, but his presence was unmistakable. There was something deeply reassuring about his watchful stillness, as if he were standing guard over Julian, and by extension, over me. The guardian's appearance was even more remarkable upon repeated viewings. His thick fur caught the light in shades of gray and russet. His hands, when I caught glimpses of them, were clearly capable of delicate work, despite their size. Most striking of all were his eyes, amber-colored and unmistakably intelligent, holding what I could only describe as ancient wisdom. What truly convinced me that I wasn't losing my mind was Julian's complete comfort with this situation. The cat showed no fear, no territorial aggression, no signs of distress. Instead, he seemed to be waiting for something, his attention constantly drawn to the forest where his mysterious companion kept watch. It was as though they shared some understanding that I was only beginning to glimpse, a connection that transcended the normal boundaries between species, or between the possible and the impossible. The first time I witnessed the bond between Julian and the guardian Dogman, I thought I was dreaming. It was a warm evening in late spring, and I had dozed off in my reading chair by the window. I woke to find Julian sitting perfectly still at the glass, his attention focused on something in the forest, with an intensity that made me follow his gaze. There, in a small clearing about 30 yards from the house, sat the guardian Dogman. His massive form was folded into a surprisingly graceful sitting position, and Julian was walking toward him with the confident stride of someone approaching an old friend. I held my breath, certain I was about to witness something terrible. But instead, I watched in wonder as Julian approached the towering creature without hesitation. The guardian Dogman remained perfectly still as the cat reached him, and then slowly, carefully, extended one enormous hand. Julian rubbed against those impossible fingers with the same affection he showed me, purring loud enough that I could hear it through the window. What happened next defied everything I thought I knew about the natural world, and my cat. The guardian Dogman began to groom Julian with a gentleness that seemed almost impossible for hands so large. His opposable thumbs worked with delicate precision, smoothing Julian's fur and cleaning behind his ears, with the patient care of a devoted companion. Julian leaned into the attention, his purr growing even louder, his eyes half closed in contentment. When the guardian finished, Julian reciprocated. He began grooming the thick fur on the creature's arm, his small pink tongue working methodically, while the guardian Dogman sat in perfect patience. It was a scene of such tender mutual care that I felt like an intruder witnessing something private. This became their evening ritual. As twilight settled over the forest, Julian would make his way to the clearing, and the guardian would emerge from deeper in the woods to meet him. They would groom each other with the comfortable familiarity of old friends, sometimes for an hour or more, while I watched from my window, often in amazement. The guardian Dogman's presence transformed my understanding of safety. Before Julian brought his friend home, I had felt secure enough in my isolated cabin, but there had always been the normal awareness of being alone in that wilderness. Now, I felt truly protected. The guardian Dogman maintained his respectful distance from me, but his watchfulness was constant and reassuring. I could sense him moving through the forest all night, a benevolent sentinel ensuring that no harm would come to Julian, or to me. Our little household found new rhythms. Julian would spend his days with me, napping in sunny spots and supervising my daily activities with his usual dignified attention. But as evening approached, he would position himself by the window, waiting for his friend to appear. And the guardian never kept him waiting for long. Years passed in this unconventional arrangement, and I came to think of the guardian Dogman as being as much a part of my life as Julian himself. The seasons changed around us, and we all adapted to the natural cycles of the forest. In winter, the guardian Dogman's thick gray fur seemed even more lustrous, and he would sometimes shake snow from his shoulders like a massive dog. In the summer, he would sit in the deeper shade, his amber eyes watchful and patient. Julian aged gracefully through these years, his orange coat perhaps a bit less vibrant, but his spirit unchanged. He maintained his evening appointments with the guardian with religious devotion, and their grooming sessions became even more tender and prolonged. It was as if they both understood that time was precious and not to be wasted. The guardian's consistency through all seasons was remarkable. Whether the forest was buried in snow or lush with summer growth, he was there. His presence became as reliable as the sunrise, as natural as the changing leaves. I grew to depend on that steadiness, that sense of being watched over by something ancient and something wise. The changes in my cat Julian came so gradually that at first I told myself I was imagining things. His jumps to the windowsill required more effort. His magnificent coat lost some of his shine, and his appetite began to wane. When I finally took him to Dr. Martinez, her expression grew increasingly concerned. "He isn't strong," she said gently. "We need to start talking about his quality of life." Over the following weeks, as Julian's condition declined despite medications and dietary changes, Dr. Martinez's suggestions became more direct. She spoke of peaceful transitions, of preventing pain, of the responsibility we have to our beloved companions when their bodies begin to fail them. "He's been such a special cat," she would say. "You can give him a peaceful goodbye surrounded by love." The weight of the decision pressed down on me during the long nights when Julian would rest fitfully. Finally, after another difficult night when Julian barely touched his food, I made the appointment. My hands trembled as I scheduled what Dr. Martinez gently referred to as Julian's final visit. That evening, I sat with Julian in his favorite spot, gently stroking his fur. He purred softly, then turned his gaze toward the window and the darkening woods beyond. In the distance, I caught a glimpse of a familiar massive silhouette standing watch over us. I woke on that Thursday morning with dread so heavy that it felt like a physical weight. The appointment was at 10 o'clock, but when I went to Julian's favorite sleeping spot by the window, he wasn't there. I called his name softly, then I searched all his usual places: the sunny spot by the south window, the cozy corner behind the armchair, the warm space near the heating vent, but nothing. My search became more frantic as minutes ticked by. I looked in every room, every closet, every space large enough to hide a cat. Finally, I stepped outside, hoping to find him on the porch or in the garden. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth from the forest. I walked around the house, calling his name, but the forest felt different. Not empty, but holding its breath, as if keeping a secret too important to share. I stood at the edge of the trees, looking into the green depths where Julian had first appeared years ago. The usual morning chorus of birds was absent, replaced by a profound quiet that felt almost ceremonial. I called Julian's name one last time, my voice carrying across the stillness. As I turned to go back inside, I caught a glimpse of something moving deep in the forest. For just a moment, I thought I saw a familiar massive silhouette, and beside it, I thought I saw a flash of orange and white, but they were only there for one instant before the trees swallowed them again, and I wasn't certain that I'd seen it. But Julian had made his choice. He had chosen to leave with his guardian, to return to the forest where he had come from, to find his own path to whatever comes next. When Dr. Martinez's office eventually called to ask if I was coming in, I found myself able to speak with surprising calmness. "No, Julian's gone," I said simply. "He left on his own terms." In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about dignity and choices, about the difference between medical necessity and natural wisdom. Julian had lived his life on his own terms. From the moment he first stepped out of the forest, why shouldn't he also choose his farewell? I thought about the guardian Dogman and the depths of loyalty that had kept him watching over Julian all these years. In those final moments, when Julian needed something I couldn't provide, his ancient friend had been there to offer an alternative. Not the sterile efficiency of a veterinary clinic, but the timeless comfort of returning to the wild places where life follows older and deeper rhythms. There was much sadness, of course. I grieved for Julian's absence, for the mornings without his gentle presence by the window. But woven through that sadness was also gratitude for having been part of something so extraordinary, and peace in knowing that Julian's story had ended the way he wanted it to. I never saw either one of them again. The forest returned to its natural rhythms, and the guardian Dogman's protective presence faded like morning mist. But I carry with me the memory of an impossible friendship, of a cat who chose his own path through life and beyond, and of a mythical being who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. Julian had taught me that there are many ways to say goodbye, and that the most meaningful ones often happen not in the places we expect, but in the quiet spaces where wild things make their own decisions about how their stories should end. The house does feel different now, but it doesn't feel empty, because it holds the echoes of purrs and the memory of amber eyes watching me from the forest.
He'll always fly and never crash. That's our EP today, named Evil Ash. Please join me in thanking tonight's executive producer, Jesse Evil Ash, for making this episode possible. As a channel member through YouTube, Jesse got to see this week's all-new Secret Uncensored Members Only Dogman story. If you'd like to check it out as well, then listen to what our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman has to say. Hank?
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.